大家好，我係 Felix，
我係 Ernest，
我哋係 Rojack。歡迎大家嚟到幾首歌之國際留聲機嘅第3集啦。咁啊，第3集咧，我哋講一個大家都好熟悉嘅國家，但係咧喺講之前咧，記得 like、share 同埋 comment 我哋呢條短片，記得話俾你身邊嘅朋友聽，因為我哋呢個 channel 好需要大家嘅支持啊！
記得啦，
係啦。咁咧，今日我哋講一個好熟悉嘅國家啦。咁係咩國家咧？
嗱，我哋會用一個非常之大家唔熟悉嘅角度咧嚟去講呢個國家喎。
OK。
呢個國家就係英國啦。
英國。
咁大家我哋香港人對英國嘅印象係點咧？
英國嘅印象，香港之前嘅宗主國啦，亦都 BNO 啦，咁近排脫歐啦，仲有好多好出色嘅領袖啊，Churchill 啊，戴卓爾夫人啊，伊麗莎白二世啊，係咪？係啦，
我喺嗰度截住你。
OK。
咁啊，一般香港人咧對戴卓爾夫人嘅印象係點樣嘅咧？
戴卓爾夫人大家都叫佢鐵娘子啊，但係佢點樣鐵法就好難知啦。咁啊，仲有之前咧，好似有套電影係講戴卓爾夫人啊，係嘛？有冇睇啊？
我就冇睇到。
Okay。
不過唔需要睇呢套電影都可以知道關於戴卓爾夫人嘅事情。
係啦。
雖然我哋今日就主要唔係講佢本人，但我哋講咧佢嘅時代同埋佢嘅呢個歷史嘅背景。
我記得啊，佢仲有簽嗰個中英聯合聲明啊嘛。
係啊。
然後喺人民大會堂嘅。
係啦。其實咧喺戴卓爾嘅時代咧，英國社會經歷咗一場巨變嘅喎。
巨變？點樣巨變法啊？
嗱，喺香港又好，喺英國又好啦，雖然好多人都崇拜戴卓爾嘅，咁但係咧喺英國咧，佢嘅遺產係深受呢個爭議。
咩遺產啊？
政治遺產。
即係你講緊佢政治留低出嚟嘅一啲，
冇錯，
後果係咪？
係啦。咁啊，英國喺二戰之後建立起嚟嘅福利社會啦，同埋以國營事業為主體嘅經濟咧，就喺戴卓爾底下咧遭受呢一個初步嘅瓦解嘅。咁啊，警政系統咧繼續針對有色人種啦。咁啊，結果就係咧大規模嘅工潮啦、失業啦，同埋種族暴動嘅。咁但係戴卓爾經濟改革咧，亦都造就咗一批嘅新嘅中產階級喎。咁我哋今日咧去講呢個戴卓爾時期咧，就聚焦喺當時嘅一個群體，就係呢個英國嘅黑人啦。
英國黑人，即係美國我就知好多黑人，即係英國都有好多黑人。其實
咧嗱，英國嘅黑人咧就不如呢一個美國同埋法國為多嘅，因為美國就佔13.4%啦，法國佔7.5%啦，但係英國嘅黑人就佔3%嘅，咁但係都有100萬人左右喎。我哋諗起英國嗰陣時咧，通常都會諗起一個白種人嘅英國啦。但係其實有些人種咧都佔英國嘅6000萬人口嘅11%嘅喎。咁對英國嘅文化係影響深遠嘅。譬如話英國曾經舉辦一個投票，就選出英國菜裏邊最受歡迎嘅一道喎。你估係咩
？Fish and chips 啊？定係一啲 Christmas pudding？
都唔係。
OK。
你估唔到㗎啦。
估唔到。
咖喱雞。
咖喱雞。
係。Chicken masala。
好。係
啦，英國嘅黑人咧佔3%啦，為英國帶嚟絕對唔止3%嘅文化影響喎。咁主要係加勒比海同埋西非嘅文化啦。咁譬如英國嘅 reggae 就好出名，譬如話黑人咧亦都係幫手呢一個創造咗 drum and bass 啊，同埋 jungle 之類嘅電子音樂嘅種類。咁我哋今日講嘅咧就係79至90年之間戴卓爾執政嘅時期咧，英國黑人音樂特別係一個叫做 Brit Funk 嘅音樂種類。
咁啊，至於其他嘅音樂種類咧，我哋打算咧會喺其他嘅集數講啦，亦都會涉及一啲咧其他歐洲，例如法國啊，或者其他歐洲國家嘅一啲黑人音樂。咁我哋亦都會之後會長談嘅。
係啦，嗱，首先我哋講一講英國嘅黑人係點樣嚟嘅。咁有歷史學家就考證咧，早喺羅馬時期啦、中世紀嗰陣時咧，呢一個英國已經有黑人㗎咯喎。
羅馬時期
係啊，因為羅馬帝國去到北非㗎嘛。係啦，咁所以咧係而家佔總人口3% 嘅呢啲黑人咧，通常咧都係嚟自1948年之後嘅呢一批嘅移民潮嘅。咁呢個係因為1948年嗰陣時英國改咗國籍法而造成嘅。咁我哋今日所熟悉嘅 BNO 咧就係1981年英國國籍法嘅產物啦。咁但係咧 喺嗰個時期之前咧，殖民地嘅子民係可以隨時咧去移居英國嘅喎。咁呢個去1971年嗰陣先至改變嘅。咁所以咧，我哋今日講嘅咧就係1948年至71年之間嚟到英國嘅呢一代嘅黑人同埋佢哋嘅呢一個子女所創造出嚟嘅黑人文化嘅。今日嘅英國黑人同埋其他有色人種咧，講到48至71年之間嘅移民英國咧，就會講到所謂 Windrush Generation， 即係疾風號世代。咁咧呢個係一隻船嘅名嚟嘅。咁其實1948年嗰陣時咧，就係呢個 Empire Windrush 呢艘船咧，載住492個加勒比海嘅黑人嚟到英國。
Arrivals at Tilbury. The Empire Windrush brings to Britain 500 Jamaicans. Many are ex-servicemen who know England. They served this country well. In Jamaica, they couldn't find work. Discouraged but full of hope, they sailed for Britain. Citizens of the British Empire coming to the mother country with good intent.
咁當時咧，距離48年嘅國籍法喺49年1月1號生效咧，仲有一段時間。咁所以當局咧係並唔開心嘅喎。咁可以話咧係英國嘅黑人咧啱嚟到嗰陣時咧，就遭遇不歡迎嘅對待。咁呢啲黑人咧好多係好高學歷嘅添，甚至有律師啊、醫生啊、護士啊等等。但嚟到英國之後咧，就唔一定係受到呢一個學歷嘅認可嘅。咁只能有做呢個廉價勞工。咁我哋而家睇一段片咧，就係1978年嗰陣時英國嘅國營鐵路嘅呢一個攝製組咧，係教導員工服務嘅態度。我哋可以見到咧，當時咧國有鐵路嘅呢啲黑人嘅員工嘅工作環境。
Looking smart in proper uniform makes life a lot easier too. The staff keep their temper and their sense of humour, even when people ask the impossible.
Does the 10:48 connect with the bus to Wisbon Trading Estate? And does the next train on from Wisbon to Plumford have a buffet car?
Sorry, madam. Only took geography up to O level. But there we have to tell you at the travel centre over there.
Oh, thank you.
And then they get the blame for things that aren't their fault.
Mind what you're doing with that broom.
The travelling public can be a real pain sometimes. But it's important not to sink to their level. Don't be tempted to give as good as you get.
同樣係呢一個國營鐵路局嘅攝製組咧，喺1961年嗰陣先拍咗一段片咧，就係喺倫敦嘅滑鐵盧總站嗰度咧，就document 一日嘅呢一個發生嘅事情。佢哋竟然影到咧係啱嚟到母國英國嘅一批嘅加勒比海嘅黑人咧落車嘅一幕喎。仲配上50、60年代流行嘅 Calypso 嘅音樂。我哋可以想像咧，佢哋係盛裝嚟到，但係咧好快就會對母國咧產生一個深切嘅失望啦。
Jamaica man, where you gone? Come eat the fish and we can sing a song. The breeze she blow, the trees they go like Jamaica. Woman dancing limbo, Montego Bay. What a day, work and eat then we all can play. Montego Bay, what a day, work and eat then we all can play. Fishing in the sea, dancing in the town, diving for the tourists all year round, watching the sun go across the sky. So much to do, I never want to die. Montego Bay, what a day, work and eat and we all can play. Jamaica, Jamaica man, Jamaica man。
喺呢段片嘅20年之後咧，即係1961至81年之間咧，英國已經唔再係一個殖民嘅大國，基本上喪失咗香港同埋幾個海島以外嘅所有嘅殖民地嘅版圖，而國內經濟咧一潭死水。1982年嗰陣時，英國嘅失業率咧係10%，有300萬人失業。
300萬
係，而英國嘅黑人嘅失業率咧係白人嘅3至4倍咁多嘅，咁所以就出現咗呢個奇景啦。 一隊模仿乞衣嘅樂隊嘅 Beggar and Co 咧，聲稱係受到街邊乞食嘅呢個叫聲所啟發咧，係寫咗一隻叫做《邊個可以幫下我》嘅歌。
邊個可以？
係啊，咁啊事先講明咧，就係以下採用嗰少少片段咧，係嚟自一個 BBC 嘅節目叫做 Top of the Pops， 係類似香港嘅呢個勁歌金曲嘅。咁啊，佢哋當時係規定呢啲咁樣嘅人咧，上台必須要咪嘴嘅喎。
必須咪嘴。
係冇辦法。其實當時英國嘅建制同埋警政系統咧，係極度厭惡呢啲有色人種嘅移民嘅。譬如話英國當時保守黨嘅影子防衛大臣 Enoch Powell 咧，就喺1968年嗰陣先發言就話咧，英國如果唔壓制移民浪潮嘅話咧，將來只會係血流成河嘅啫。
This country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man.
It's like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre.
咁雖然保守黨馬上係免去咗 Enoch Powell 嘅職務啦嚇，但係米已成炊啦。英國極右運動已經成型，並且係視 Enoch Powell 為佢哋嘅偶像。係啊，但係不僅如此喎，呢個種族主義咧係系統化嘅。當時咧，譬如早期嘅戇豆先生 Rowan Atkinson 咧，亦都有諷刺過警政系統去歧視呢個黑人嘅情況喎。
I want to talk to you about some charges that you've been bringing lately. I think that perhaps you're being a little overzealous.
Which charges do you mean, then, sir?
Well, for instance, this one. Loitering with intent to use a pedestrian crossing. Savage, maybe you're not aware of this, but it is not illegal to use a pedestrian crossing. Neither is smelling of foreign food an offence.
You sure, sir?
Also, there is no law against urinating in a public convenience or coughing without due care and attention.
If you say so, sir.
Yes, I do say so, Savage. In short, Savage, in the space of 1 month, you have brought 117 ridiculous, trumped-up and ludicrous charges.
Yes, sir.
Against the same man.
Yes, sir.
A Mr. Winston Kodogo of 55 Mercer Road. I know he's a jailbird, Savage. He's down in the cells now. We're holding him on a charge of possession of curly black hair and thick lips.
Well, there you are, sir.
You arrested him, Savage.
Thank you, sir.
Savage, would I be correct in assuming that Mr. Kodogo is a coloured gentleman?
Well, I can't say I've ever noticed, sir.
咁當然黑人都有組織起嚟反抗啦，咁但係咧就經常所託非人嘅。譬如其中一個領袖咧，就係喺英國倫敦嘅諾丁山呢個地方咧，一個當時比較窮嘅地方，而家唔係啦。叫做 Michael de Freitas 嘅一個人，咁佢係既收保護費，亦都將啲爛溶溶嘅樓咧就租俾啲移民去住嘅。咁但係咧佢就被邀請上去 BBC 嗰度咧，就代表黑人講説話。咁佢講嘅説話都極為深刻嘅喎，就話咧黑人咧係喺呢啲殖民地裏邊咧係被教導咧英國就係所有事情嘅中心，但係佢哋嚟到所有事情嘅中心嗰陣時，先發現咧呢個中心係排斥佢哋嘅。
You must remember that when we came to this country, we were not traveling to a foreign country. We were taught, I was taught when I was a young man, that my country, Trinidad, was an extension of this one. We were weaned on the concept of the empire. When I was a young boy, I stood in 90 degrees of sun, day after day, and sang all kind of silly things like God Save the Queen, Land of Hope and Glory, Britannia Rule the Waves, with the greatest of fervor. and believed every word of it. To come here and discover that not only wasn't I not traveling to the capital of the whole thing, which we were led to believe was so, but in actual fact we weren't wanted, has been a very shattering blow. Many people in this country who think that we are very hateful are so wrong.
You see, this is the great mystery. When you came here, you say you found you weren't wanted. Why then did you stay? Why did you choose to stay here?
This was the heartland of the whole thing, and one hoped against hope that what one saw was not right.
咁結果咧喺諾丁山地區咧就聚居咗大量嘅黑人。果然喺1958年嗰陣時就發生咗黑白之間嘅呢一個嘅衝突。咁係白人攻擊黑人。喺59年開始咧，為咗呢一個調和種族關係咧，諾丁山每年都會舉辦一個嘅嘉年華。但係咧由1976年開始，每年咧呢個嘉年華都係以種族嘅暴亂為結束嘅。咁當時咧警力之多咧，甚至係被稱為警察嘉年華嘅添。咁跟住落嚟呢一首嘅 Ayoko 咧，就係嚟自加南嘅英國樂隊，叫做 Osibisa。咁我哋可以思考一下佢哋講嘅 Promised Land 究竟係講緊邊度啦。喺81年4月同埋85年9月咧，喺倫敦南部嘅 Brixton 黑人區咧，就發生咗兩場巨型嘅呢一個種族暴亂。咁當然黑人稱之為起義啦。咁81年嘅嗰場暴亂嘅直接觸發點咧，就係警方嘅一場嘅執法行動，就叫做咩咧？就叫做淹沒81大行動喎。咁咧呢個取材自戴卓爾喺78年嗰陣時嘅一場嘅演說。咁佢就話咧，英國係俾一個異文化咧所淹沒嘅。咁所以咧可以話係由戴卓爾本人嘅呢個種族主義所引發嘅。咁喺警方執法嘅過程裏邊咧，佢哋大量任意咁呢一個截查黑人啦嚇，期間造成一個黑人嘅死亡嘅。咁但係警察仍不顧眾怒，繼續呢個淹沒81大行動。咁結果咧就種族大暴亂啦。咁喺85年9月嗰次咧，甚至係喺圍捕嫌疑犯嗰陣先打死咗佢阿媽。咁結果再次引發種族暴亂。咁如此，我哋可以理解點解73年嗰陣時 Bob Marley 出嘅一首歌叫做《I Shot the Sheriff》咧，即係我打死咗一個警長咧。呢首歌74年都 Eric Clapton 翻唱過嘅，咁就喺81年嗰陣時喺英國得到翻唱嘅。咁翻唱嘅嗰隊樂隊咧叫 Light of the World， 咁都係頗為重要一隊樂隊嚟嘅。 實喺73年嘅石油危機之後咧，好多西方國家都陷於所謂滯脹之中。咩叫滯脹咧？就係經濟嘅增長停滯，但係通脹就唔停滯，仲要暴升喎。咁呢個就導致薪水嘅縮水啦。咁工會自然咧就要帶頭要求加薪啦。啱啊。咁但係工黨政府當時咧對此係唔領情嘅喎。係啦，係啊。咁當時工黨政府咧為咗係去向呢一個國際咧表明自己財政方面有紀律咧，就作出連串嘅失策，包括咧係將加薪咧喺1978年夏天咧就劃一為5%，而工會要求5%至8%嘅。咁結果咧就各行業工會就冇得走盞啊，咁就被逼要同政府對抗嘅。咁1978年冬天咧，當時係一個特別凍嘅冬天啦嚇，各行業開始罷工喎。咁結果咧就垃圾冇人倒啦，墳墓冇人挖啦，巴士冇人揸啦等等。咁工黨嘅首相咧叫卡拉漢咧，當時就走咗去卡勒比海地區咧開會喎。避寒係啦，避寒。咁佢喺翻到去倫敦嗰下咧，有記者問佢：你點睇而家英國嘅呢一個咁深刻嘅危機？咁卡拉漢就竟然答咗一句：危機？咩危機啊？咁樣。咁第二日咧就《太陽報》就登咗喺頭版上高。咁結果卡拉漢就輸咗79年嘅大選啦。咁戴卓爾當時代表保守黨咧，就呢個贏取咗79年嘅大選，打冧咗呢個被全國視為無能嘅工黨政府啊！咁大家可以睇下80年喺 BBC 眼中係點樣樣㗎啦。
The year started very differently, with a distinctly 1970s hangover.
And the government are determined to have a real go at the steel workers.
Mrs. Thatcher was in her second year of power, but her goal of an 80s economic revolution would be a long time coming.
We knew the inflation figures were going to be bad, but at nearly 22% they were beyond even the most pessimistic forecasts.
And policies like selling off council houses divided the country, but only stiffened her resolve.
The ladies not for turning.
What these 1980 tribes had in common, from young soul rebels to rude boys to synth futurists, was working class roots.
Talks have been going on, but there's no sign of any agreement. The steel industry faces an unhappy Easter.
And in contrast to art school middle class punks, their upbringing gave them a different attitude to Top of the Pops.
Mr. Scargill was at the head of a march in Sheffield to protest against government spending cuts.
必須留意嘅就係咧，保守黨贏咗大選之後咧，工程仍然繼續嘅喎。咁當時喺79年嘅8月啦 ，BBC 以外最大嘅電視台 ITV 咧就罷工咗11個禮拜。咁即使係罷工嘅時期咧，冇節目嘅情況底下咧，呢個收視率仍然係100萬左右嘅喎。因為點解咧？就當時 ITV 嘅畫面寫住咧，即將恢復播映，而好多人咧寧願開住 ITV 咧都唔想睇翻 BBC 嘅。
點解咧嚇？
因為 BBC 實在太入啦。
哦，咁樣嘅。係
啦，另外咧喺82年嘅6月咧，英國鐵路局就罷工咗2個禮拜喎，係1927年以嚟咧最嚴重嘅鐵路罷工嚟。咁最後戴卓爾咧係威脅咧係炒晒所有罷工嘅司機咧，個服務先至恢復正常嘅。咁英國當時嘅年青人咧並唔鍾情於呢一個上層社會，都唔同情呢個建制嘅，反而咧當時嘅社會氣氛咧係取笑上層建制嘅喎。今日香港有東方星啦，有 ERROR 啊，81年嘅英國咧就有一隊 band 叫做 The Evasions， 咁咧就係取笑咧當時一個叫做 Alan Wicker 嘅記者。咁呢個 BBC 嘅記者本來係軍官嚟嘅，咁可以想象佢嘅呢一個人格係點樣啦。咁喺當時冇幾多人可以出國旅行嘅時代咧 ，BBC 就派 Alan Wicker 咧就去周圍咧去報導遠性新聞啊，就好似方東升咁樣啦。
A brash, air-conditioned nightmare where we wait forever under neon for a jackpot that never turns up.
Hello. They're charming, aren't they? Or if they're not, they jolly soon ought to be, because they're students at a London charm school.
咁結果咧，英國歷史上第一張上到榜嘅 rap 唱片咧，就係 BBC 嘅音樂人咧，叫做 Graham DeWilde 取笑呢個 Alan Wicker 而製作出嚟。咁佢 sample 咗啲美國嘅的士高音樂，譬如話 Tom Brown 嘅 Fun for Jamaica 同埋 Chic 嘅 Good Times咁樣啦。咁當然咧，上咗 BBC 嘅 Top of the Pops 咧，就係由 DeWilde 自己咧嚟去演出呢個 Alan Wicker 啦。
So in the vernacular, let's get serious. After just 30 seconds, it's hard to imagine how to survive without the rope lights, the tight trousers, the tinsel and the glitter that is Saturday Night Fever. Here, excitement comes in a 12-inch disc. Getting the funk out of your face is socially acceptable. Get the funk out of my face. Get the funk out of my face. So there you have it. A society within a society, a world within a world, where words are the music of life, and life is the music of words, and where the southern freeze is not a cold day in Bournemouth. This is a place where good roots don't grow on trees. Love it, hate it, but you can't ignore it. Here, good is bad, and bad is about as good as you can possibly get.
而好能夠反映80年代現實嘅咧，就係左派樂隊 The Style Council 嘅一首歌喎。咁呢首歌咧就同黑人女歌手 DC Lee 合作嘅，歌名咧就諷刺咗咧戴卓爾經常掛喺口邊嘅一句説話，就係我只不過係一個電東嘅女嚟嘅啫。咁啊有 YouTube 留言咧就話呢首歌聽起嚟就好似 cocktail party 音樂，讀起上嚟就好似社會主義刊物喎。咁啊呢個都係事實嚟嘅，因為喺86年嗰陣時咧 Style Council 咧就會同其他樂隊一齊咧組成一個運動。叫做紅色尖銳，咁咧就嘗試幫助呢個工黨喺87年嗰陣先係競選嘅，咁最後失敗啦嚇。咁呢個運動嘅名咧就嚟自蘇聯一張早期嘅海報，意識咧就用紅色嘅尖銳嚟去插穿呢個白色嘅反動勢力嘅。咁呢首歌嘅歌詞內容咧，大家都可以估到啦，就係指責上層建制咧係水閘去吸血啊，向窮人發動戰爭啊之類啦。咁呢首歌嘅背景就係80年代初啦，呢一個戴卓爾咧對工會進行種種嘅權力嘅限制，以及咧就係緊接而嚟嘅呢個84至85年嗰陣時咧，戴卓爾嘗試關閉中原地區大量嘅呢個煤礦所造成嘅南約克郡嘅煤礦嘅大罷工。咁啊，佢嘅領導者咧，呢個全國礦工總會嘅主席咧叫 Arthur Scargill 啦，當時係深刻嘅有呢個共產主義傾向嘅。而當時呢個煤礦同埋左翼嘅郡議員所在嘅呢個南約克郡咧，甚至係被戲稱為咧南約克郡社會主義共和國嘅添。
You must be out of your mind. Every room always the same. Those who play the future's game don't get settled in this place. The largest times are in this place. An equal chance, an equal say, but equally there's no equal pay.
另一個咧同工黨關係密切，並且係參加過紅色尖銳運動嘅一個黑人嘅歌手咧，就係 Junior Giscombe。咁佢喺1982年推出嘅《太遲啦》呢一張碟咧，就係一張反映家暴問題嘅碟嚟喎，就係講一個妻子咧同埋佢嘅仔女咧係不堪對待咧離家嘅。
When he comes home intoxicated from the club, all the kids they go and snuggle up to mom. He starts shouting again, they start running again. This ain't no life for them to lead. In her mind she knows she has to let him go. In the children's eyes she sees the fear inside. How does she tell him he won't take it now? This ain't no life for them to lead. Too late, baby, bye-bye. Now's my time to go.
其實喺80年代初咧，英國嘅黑人音樂咧並唔係注定帶有呢個政治性質嘅喎。譬如 David Grant 帶領嘅 Lynx 樂隊咧，當時只不過係想建立一隊咧係可以匹敵美國嘅的士高音樂嘅樂隊嘅一隊本土嘅樂隊嘅啫。咁但係由一開始差唔多啦，英國嘅風咧就同美國嘅 disco 好唔同。咁詳細嘅方面咧，我交俾你解釋啦。
咁咧美國的士歌咧，一般咧我哋聽嗰啲蹦切嘅個時候咧，通常咧個重拍咧就會 on the one， 咩意思咧？就係第一拍同第三拍，因為一般嘅歌我哋都會有4拍噶嘛，就蹦切。但係咧，如果英國嘅 funk 咧就調翻轉嘅，就會係 off beat 上嚟嘅，即係蹦切咁樣。咁咧個重拍上邊係有唔同嘅，咁聽出嚟同埋跳舞嘅方向都有啲唔同嘅。譬如 funk 咧就會有嗰個佢哋所謂嘅 groove 啊，就係一個好有感覺嘅一樣嘢啦。因為我唔係好識講係咩，但係蹦切咁樣跳舞咯。咁但係如果 on the one就係咁樣，係啦咁樣咯。係啦，唔知我夠唔夠詳細啦？
咁我都樂理方面唔係我嘅專長啦，我只不過係今日講歷史嘅啫，係咪？咁嗱，英國嘅 funk 咧，其實都有促成呢一個 new wave 嘅形成嘅喎。咁首先咧，英國嘅 funk 嘅呢個界別咧，就係一個好細嘅群體嚟嘅。咁佢幾個嘅主要嘅樂隊咧，包括剛才聽過嘅呢一個 Light of the World 啊、Beggar and Co 啊咁樣咧，同埋即將會聽到嘅 Freeze 同埋 Incognito 咧，都係互相交疊或者係由彼此嗰度咧拆分出嚟嘅喎。咁而 Freeze 開台嗰陣時咧，本來係由白人呢個 John Rocker 同埋黑人吉他手Louis Monick 合作嘅，所以對黑人同白人音樂都有影響嘅。咁81年初嘅呢一首 Southern Freeze 咧，佢所指嘅咧就唔係好凍喎，而係指一種咧大家會 freeze 嘅舞步。咁所以咧，剛才喺 Wicked Rap 大家會聽到有一句咧，就話 Southern Freeze 咧 is not a cold day in Bournemouth， 即係話咧唔係南部呢個 Bournemouth 呢個港口城市好大風好凍嘅一日，而係 freeze 嘅呢個舞步。咁大家仲可以欣賞到Peter Mas 嘅強烈嘅 bass， 以及係嚟自倫敦北嘅 Ingrid Mansell Orman 懶洋洋嘅呢一個 Cockney 嘅呢一個歌喉。Beggar and Co 咧，亦都係為呢一個80年代初嘅新浪潮嘅巨頭 Spandau Ballet 咧，係第2首上榜嘅歌曲咧，係吹奏呢個 brass section 添嘅喎。咁所以可以見到咧，就係呢一個黑人同白人音樂咧，喺英國嚟講咧，就並唔係界線好清楚嘅。 咁對呢一個 New Wave 嘅形成亦都係有龐大嘅貢獻嚟嘅添。咁喺 Reggae 方面嘅政治代表咧，就非 Smiley Culture 莫屬啦。咁佢寫過嘅歌咧，就取笑過警察啊等等啦嚇。咁但係同樣有名嘅一首歌咧，就係取笑阿戴卓爾嘅喎。咁歌詞咧，大概就係 Smiley Culture 咧喺不法嘅勾當裏邊咧，就買到一座好靚嘅別墅。咁啊，令到咧住厭咗唐寧街10號嘅呢一個戴卓爾咧就垂涎欲滴喎，甚至咧係願意辭職嚟去換取呢座別墅添。咁啊，最後雙方同意咧就以一間叫做 Western 嘅直升機公司嘅股份咧嚟作為交換嘅。咁呢間公司咧就係英國當時最後一間製造呢一個直升機嘅公司。但英國嘅國防部寧願買美國嘅產品，都唔買英國嘅產品。咁結果就導致嗰間公司嘅呢一個瀕臨倒閉嘅。咁英國嘅政府裏邊咧，當時有意見分歧啦。咁有一班人就想賣呢間公司俾一班歐洲嘅公司。咁另外一個意見咧就係將呢間公司賣俾一間嘅美國嘅公司。咁結果咧，簡單嚟講咧就係戴卓爾使橫手，就促使咗呢間公司同美國嘅一間公司嘅合併。咁呢件事件咧被泄露出嚟嗰陣時咧，嗰個影響係大到咧阿戴卓爾自己差啲要辭職添。咁所以咧呢首歌咧第一句説話就係話咧，戴卓爾喺呢間公司裏邊係有股份嘅。
Margaret Thatcher half shares in Westland helicopter. I know she wants to give them to Smiley Culture. Margaret Thatcher half shares in Westland helicopter. I know she wants to give them to Smiley Culture. Well, first I think I better have a word with my lawyer.
No, let us sort out this matter.
Who?
You and I, without the media.
So if me do that, tell me what you have to offer.
I will give you all my power, shares, anything you require.
What? Shares plus 4 brand new tire?
Shares in British Leyland, if that's what you desire.
Sin, but me don't want that. Me want something better. Something that can fly and that can hover.
I think you mean a helicopter. Got it, I can get it. Westland, I own it. I should have been a poet. To think I didn't know it.
呢個係幾多年嘅事啊
？86年。
86年。
咁戴卓爾咧當時咧一系列嘅呢一個針對工會啊、金融自由化、國有資產嘅私有化呢啲咁嘅政策咧，都促成咗一班嘅中產新貴嘅出現。當然主要係白人啦。咁有電子 keyboard 神童之稱嘅呢個 Paul Hardcastle 同埋英國嘅黑人嘅歌手 Kevin Henry 合作嘅呢首歌咧，就好反映呢班人嘅生活嘅狀況。
Right, never wrong, that's how you want to be. It seems you're in some kind of a race. Why don't you realize you're killing what we have? It's staring you in the face. Now the games that you play and the words that you say make you look like a fool. Then you try to deny my right to reply. I'm gonna point out to you, you're only fooling yourself. Only fooling yourself.
而係能夠反映黑人中產化嘅咧，就係 Loose Ends 呢隊樂隊啦。咁呢個喺當時嘅環境咧係並唔容易嘅。由於唱片公司老闆出於銷情考慮進行干預咧 ，Loose Ends 嘅第一張唱片咧個封面甚至不能夠出現佢哋黑人嘅呢啲成員嘅呢個樣貌添，係只係能夠有一個白人金髮嘅細路仔嘅面嘅呢個樣，咁喺一個雲裏邊嘅添。咁所以咧。Loose Ends 同埋之前嘅黑人樂隊嘅分別咧，就係佢係全電子嘅，而且係重電子嘅添。佢係採取一部咧係叫做 TL808 嘅鼓機。咁呢部機我哋之前都介紹過嘅，就係一部本來喺日本發明嚟咧係用嚟做呢個卡拉 OK 嘅編程嘅一部鼓機嚟嘅。咁佢嘅監製咧 Nick Martinelli 咧就係由美國以蘇寧音樂為著稱嘅呢一個費城咧嗰度空降英國嘅。但佢就致力創造一種新嘅音樂嘅模式。咁最後呢種音樂咧， 不但只喺英國係大熱啦，仲係反攻美國，喺榜首高居不下。特別喺紐約呢啲地方咧，係深受黑人所歡迎嘅。
That after all this time, I waited like a fool. Now who's been changing you? You got me hanging on the line now. I'm not your slave, baby. You got me hanging on the line now. I ain't no plaything. You never told me you were waiting, contemplating.
咁當然咧 ，Loose Ends 亦都觸及到黑人同埋警政嘅問題啦，並且 showcase 出佢哋一個好新嘅科技，叫做 green screen。
You got my phone number, it's up to you. If you don't wanna call, what am I to do? You got my only number, it's up to you. If you don't wanna call, 999. This is an emergency. 999. This is an emergency. 999. This is an emergency. Come closer to my love. Closer to my love. 999 is not in service. 999 is not in service. Why don't you pick up the telephone? Why don't you pick up the telephone? Claim that you're mad. Be your biggest fan. You can play Johnny Cool. Just don't play no fool, yeah. If you're feeling down or you're feeling blue, you got my phone number, it's up to you. If you don't wanna call, what am I to do? You got my only number, it's up to you. If you don't wanna call, 999, this is an emergency.
Loose Ends 直接影響咗一個叫 Toyin Agbetu 嘅尼日利亞裔嘅一個音樂人。咁由於出現咗一個電子編程嘅音樂啦，而 Agbetu 自己就係讀電子編程嘅，咁所以咧佢又熱愛音樂喎，咁所以將兩者咧揉埋一齊啦。咁佢偶然喺佢自己工作嘅呢個商店咧，就遇到 Loose Ends 嘅主音 Jane Eugene 同埋 Carl McIntosh。咁恰好佢自己錄製嘅嗰個錄音帶咧，又帶咗喺身邊喎。咁於是佢就攞到呢一個大唱片公司嘅一個contact， 但係咧最後咧就 reject 咗佢哋嘅offer。咁咧佢自己咧就開始搞一種係服務於黑人街頭文化嘅電子音樂，叫做 street soul， 即係街頭蘇寧。咁喺1988年嗰陣時咧，佢就花錢租咗一大批機器咧，就喺佢自己嘅公屋單位裏邊咧，花咗一個 weekend 咧就錄製咗一隻嘅專輯。
咁佢嗰陣時買咗啲咩設備咧？
咁嗱，除咗 TR-808之外啦，仲有一堆咧而家好出名嘅一啲嘅設備，譬如話 Yamaha DX7 啦、TX802 啦、呢個 Roland 嘅 SH101 啦等等，係啦。
我都想要啊，101。
係啦，咁Toyin Agbetu 咧已經成為咗咧呢一個80年代黑人音樂界裏邊街頭蘇寧嘅領軍人物啦。咁但係佢今日咧，佢已經係一個學者嚟嘅喎，喺 UCL 咧就研究呢一個社會文化人類學嘅，並且係多次咧係呢一個參加抗議活動， 咁包括喺2007年嗰陣時咧，就抗議呢一個英女王咧出席呢個英國廢除奴隸制200週年嘅紀念活動。咁大家可以記住就係加勒比海嘅黑人咧，都係因為奴隸制先會去到嗰度嘅啫。咁另外咧就係 Tonya Bechtel 咧，亦都係做過呢一個倫敦市長設立嘅一個種族多元化委員會嘅委員嘅。
Loving you at night was such a sheer delight. You said you loved me, you said you cared. Now I'm so confused, don't know what to do. So tell me, baby, speak the truth. Do you feel for him like I just feel for you? I sense you want me, I feel you care. But let me tell you, girl, don't you know that I won't share you? Do you still really love me? Do you still really need my loving? Do you still really love me? Do you still really care? Am I the one you want? Am I the one you need? Am I the one you want? Am I the one you need?
We started off as just good friends, but now we seem to be much more. I told you of the things I never dreamed to tell others before, but what we have discovered of each other would be plain to see that we are suffering from our individual fantasy.
Am I the one you want? Am I the one you need? Can you be sure of this? Won't you tell me, please? Am I the one you want? Am I the one you need? Can you be sure of this? Won't you tell me, please?
Am I the one?
另外喺1988至89年冒起嘅另一波音樂咧，就叫做 Acid House。更加係將電子音樂嘅呢個可能性推到極致嘅。咁顧名思義咧，呢種音樂源自於呢一個芝加哥嘅 House， 但係只不過係佢嘅加強同埋加快嘅版本，並且係更加適合人食咗揈頭丸之後嘅跳動嘅需要喎。有兩個 DJ 啦嚇，叫做 Shut Up and Dance 啊，即係講你啦，收聲跳舞啦。叫做 Carlson Hyman 同埋 Philip Johnson 咧，加上咗 rap 嘅元素，以及咧係將美國 hip hop 嘅一啲同埋 funk 嘅一啲嘅 sample， 譬如話 Raw Silk 喺82年嘅 Do It to the Music， 同埋 Afrika Bambaataa 喺83年嘅 Looking for a Perfect Beat 嘅呢啲 sample 加咗落去裏邊嘅。
Your heart is jumping, so you feel like doing something. So do it, pull the music, feel the vibe while I do it. Cast a spit on you, it's my chance to see how many can dance. I'm not impressed by what I've seen. A lot of suckers, you know what I mean? In every discotheque across town, all I ever see is dance floor clowns. They're not moving, they're not grooving. All the time I just see them losing the rhythm, like Backstreet I give them. So here it is, listen. I'm a dancer, that's the right question. Yes, put a mic on my hand, I'm like a veteran. From Norm, they say I'm not stable. I need help, but I get it from the turntable.
喺88至89年嘅兩次夏天咧，被統稱為1967年夏天以嚟嘅第二次愛之夏 （Second Summer of Love）。呢啲 呢個時期咧，當時嘅 rave party 咧可以話係遍地開花嘅。譬如話喺呢一個廢棄嘅工廠啊、田野啊、停車場啊呢啲咁嘅地方啊，咁由於涉及毒品咧，咁啊警方嘅鎮壓力度都係非常之龐大啊，派幾千警力去鎮壓嘅。咁但係咧不久咧，啲人發現咧就係咩咧？就係80年代英國一個好重要嘅一個社會問題咧，就係球迷騷亂喎。而喺8889年嘅呢個愛之夏之後咧，竟然球迷騷亂有所減弱喎。原來咧就係咧呢班球迷咧就去咗食揈頭丸同埋跳舞啦。咁甚至啊喺曼徹斯特咧呢個曼城同曼聯兩支咁嘅球隊嘅呢個球迷咧，竟然可以喺同一個地方跳舞，並且咧係互相相安無事嘅添。咁所以咧當時咧有一啲人咧就視之為一個係好和平嘅一個運動。咁隨之而嚟咧就係佢呢個運動嘅中產化啦。咁代表性好強咧就係 Soul to Soul 呢個樂團，佢嘅主要人物咧就係主音 Karen Wheeler 同埋佢嘅監製嘅 Jazzy B。咁佢哋嘅左翼嘅非洲文化嘅呢一個影響同埋民族主義影響咧，都係非常之深刻嘅。咁佢哋嘅中產化都唔係注定嘅喎。譬如話 Jazzy B 咧就經常咧就喺一個叫做非洲中心嘅地方咧進行合作嘅。非洲中心咧係1964年嗰陣時咧係由贊比亞嘅總統咧卡翁達咧喺倫敦開幕嘅。如果大家唔熟悉嘅話咧，就係呢一個卡翁達咧就係呢一個60年代嗰陣時咧同毛澤東合作咧喺非洲嘅坦桑尼亞同埋贊比亞之間咧起咗條叫做坦贊鐵路嘅一個咁樣嘅巨大嘅工程。當時係用咗中國嘅工程師啊、中國嘅火車咁樣，咁可以見到佢有幾咁左派嘅呢一個立場啊。大規模嘅失業、煤礦工人罷工、強迫國企同美國合併，都冇影響戴卓爾，但係將佢拉落嚟咧就係呢個作法自斃喎。喺80年代末咧，戴卓爾為咗簡化呢個地方政府嘅稅收咧，就提出一個叫做社區徵費制嘅制度，咁就將呢個差餉制度就廢除，並且每人咧不論貧富咧必須要上繳一個固定嘅稅率，簡稱呢個人頭稅嘅。咁結果咧喺90年3月31號咧，數十萬人咧就抵達呢個特拉法加廣場，同警察爆發激烈嘅衝突，並且放火燒咗呢個南非駐英國嘅大使館，因為南非當時仍然係種族隔離嘅政策嘅國家嚟嘅。咁喺90年11月咧，戴卓爾就喺黨內逼宮之下辭職啦。時至今日咧，英國嘅黑人咧仍然係為佢哋嘅基本權益喺打拼嘅。喺2010年嗰陣時咧，當時嘅英國嘅保守黨嘅內政部咧，就竟然將40至70年代抵達英國嘅黑人嘅嗰啲嘅登記卡咧，就係集體註銷咗，造成咧80幾個老年嘅呢一個移民咧係被遞解出境啊、剝奪公民資格啊等等嘅。咁呢一場咧又名為 Windrush Scandal 嘅呢個事件啦，疾風號醜聞啦，雖然導致當時嘅內政大臣下台，但係目前咧仍然未得到圓滿嘅處理嘅。英國嘅有色人種嘅平等咧，仍然係要行非常之漫長嘅道路。咁最後一首歌咧就係1990年 Loose Ends 改組之後咧，根據最新嘅 New Jack Swing 嘅呢一個風格咧，嚟創作嘅一首專輯嘅一首歌嚟嘅。咁今日咧就講到呢一度，多謝大家。
Yourself
Good evening. Even now, over 12 hours on, you have to pinch yourself to realise it, but the Thatcher era is over.